So hello there. Well, this is Loud, and welcome back to another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Spy Knight, and in these podcasts, I love talking all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I continue on with my Star Wars film reviews, as I review probably the most controversial Star Wars movie, Star Wars Episode VIII, The Last Jedi. So, let's get into it, shall we? Star Wars Episode VIII, The Last Jedi was released in 2017. Yes, it was released that long ago. I know 2017 doesn't feel like that long ago, but it actually was. It was, if I got my maths correct here, it was 8 years ago. This Christmas, this film will be 8 years old, which is crazy to think about. And this film is, of course, the 8th main Star Wars movie. If you count the spin-offs, I suppose this would be the 10th movie, but I'm not counting the spin-off movies like Rogue One, Solo, or the Clone Wars movie. No, so this is the 8th main Star Wars movie, and it is the first and only Star Wars movie to be written and directed by Rian Johnson. Rian Johnson, who, if you're not familiar with by name, is probably best known for directing outside of this film the likes of Knives Out, the Knives Out sequel, Glass Onion, and the Knives Out Mystery. Both of those films I really enjoyed, particularly Glass Onion. I enjoyed that a lot more than most people. And he also directed the films he also directed the likes of, I think it's called Brick and Looper. Neither of those films I've seen. I was hoping to watch those films before doing this review today, but, well, life just got in the way. But other than this film, the Rian Johnson films I have seen are Knives Out and Glass Onion and Knives Out Mystery, and I enjoy both of those films a hell of a lot. He's also worked in TV. He's most recently done the Poker Face TV show. He seems to be the driving force behind that TV show, and he has directed episodes of Breaking Bad. Now, I haven't seen Breaking Bad. It's on my watch list. I will one day. It's just one of those things that I just never find the time to watch. But my brother has seen it. He loves Breaking Bad, and he says that Rian Johnson has directed one of the best episodes. He directed one of the best episodes in that show overall. So Rian Johnson is quite a prolific filmmaker, particularly in recent years. Probably since this movie came out and since Knives Out, Rian Johnson has become far more prolific in the world of cinema, in the world of movies, and in Hollywood as a whole. And I remember when this film came out, all the way back in 2017, which doesn't feel that long ago again, but it was. Yeah, I remember looking forward to this movie very much because, well, I was looking forward to it for a number of reasons. First of all, I was a huge fan of The Force Awakens, and I still am, and I loved the trailers for the film and how they looked like they were continuing on the story from The Force Awakens, but adding its own twist on it. It looked like its own thing, but also it looked like a sequel to The Force Awakens, and in all the best ways. And I wanted to see how all these storylines continued. I wanted to see how Luke Skywalker was going to be used in this sequel trilogy, and I couldn't wait to see the film because it was a continuation from The Force Awakens, which I loved. But also, on a more personal level, I was looking forward to this film because 2017 was, and pardon my French here, a shit, and I mean shit year. A lot happened in 2017 for me that I'm not going to go into great detail on because, I don't want to bore people. But I don't want to bore somebody who might be watching or listening to this review. But in 2017, that was a year that I found out my dad had cancer. So that was difficult in itself. I was getting bullied at school, and there were other things going on at the time which weren't great. And school wasn't great either. I didn't feel like I was doing well there. And the thing that kept me going throughout all these tough times, throughout finding out about my dad's illness, and throughout finding out about, and throughout getting bullied, was the fact that a new Star Wars movie was coming out this Christmas. Honestly, there were so many parts in 2017 there were so many moments in 2017 where I would get quite depressed, and then I would just think, get through it, because there's a Star Wars movie coming out this Christmas, and that you know how much Star Wars means to you. I mean, just look how much Star Wars means to me. Just look behind me. I'm so clearly a big Star Wars fan. And I love The Force Awakens. And so whenever I would get down in 2017, which was a hell of a lot, the thought that would come back to me was, there is a Star Wars movie coming out this Christmas, and you're going to make it to that Star Wars movie, even if it kills you, which at times it felt like it was going to. So yes, 2017 was a particularly difficult year for me, and the thing that kept me going throughout most of 2017 was knowing that there was going to be a Star Wars movie at the end of the tunnel. You know, there was a light at the end of the tunnel, and that was this movie. That was The Last Jedi. I remember when that title got released, you know, the title for the film got released in April of 2017 with the first trailer for this film, with that teaser trailer, which still excites me whenever I rewatch, and I do occasionally rewatch the teaser trailer for this film. I actually rewatched it this morning before doing this review today, and I remember hearing that title for the first time and thinking, okay, who is The Last Jedi? Is it Rey? Is it Luke Skywalker? Is it somebody else that we just don't know about? Is it Snoke? Because there were reports coming out before this film came out that Snoke had a much bigger role in this film. Is The Last Jedi even Kylo Ren, aka Ben Solo? I was so excited about this film that I would watch theory video on this movie day after day after day, and I would rewatch the trailer constantly, trying to pick apart it, see if there were any little details which I missed the first time around. And then the day finally came. I think it was December the 16th or December the 17th. It may not even be either of those days, but it was one of those days. It was around that time that I watched the film for the first time. And I remember prior to me watching the film for the first time, the reviews for the film came out, and this is probably the first time I'd been interested in reviews regarding a movie. I'd been interested to hear about the response to a film, and I read some critic reviews that were very positive about the movie. I think generally, and not all critics, but generally, the critics really liked this film. But there were a couple of movie pundits that I followed online, and I still follow online now, who are big Star Wars fans, and they're very, they talk about their love of Star Wars a lot. And there was one in particular, I'm not going to name them because I don't really want to, but there was one movie pundit who was a big Star Wars fan that I follow online, and they were very mixed on the film. I remember watching their review thinking, oh, you know, this person was huge on The Force Awakens. I know this person was excited to see this film because they made quite a lot of videos about it, and yet they're mixed on it. So I went to the cinema feeling like, okay, this movie might not actually be for me, because that person wasn't the only person I'd heard give a slightly mixed response to the film. There were other mixed responses coming out from the premiere of this film, and although the critics seemed very positive, there were Star Wars fans who, like I said, were mixed on the movie, gave a mixed response after seeing it for the first time. So I went into the film feeling like, this might not be for me. I mean, I'm dead excited to see it, but I'm also prepared to be disappointed. And then, about 2.5 hours later, more like 2 hours and 34 minutes later, that's actually the precise runtime of the film. I noticed it when I watched it on Disney Plus the other day. I actually rewatched it on Disney Plus on my birthday. When I came out of the cinema, 2 hours and 34 minutes, or more like 3 hours with adverts, but still, you get the point. After I left the cinema, seeing this movie for the first time, I remember thinking to myself, you know what? That was really good. I enjoyed that a lot. And then I did the thing I probably shouldn't have done. I went on my phone. I went to my phone coming back from the cinema after seeing this movie, and I was looking up the responses in this film, because I saw it, I think, a day or two after it officially released, after a lot of people already seen it, you know, and there was plenty of reviews out there regarding this film already, and a lot of them were mixed. A lot of them were leaning on the negative side, and a lot of them were picking apart the film scene by scene by scene, picking apart all the plot holes in the movie. And I remember watching a lot of these reviews from, you know, YouTubers that I respected, and some YouTubers that I still respect, and thinking, oh God, should I not like this film? You know, and that was reinforced by the fact that a couple of days, I think it may not have been a couple of days after, but it was in January, after, we had the Christmas break over 2017 to 2018, we're in the new year now, we're in 2018, I remember going back to school, and there was somebody at school who I'm not going to name, because they may very well be watching this review today, and I think they'll know who they are, but I was pretty close to them at the time, we've kind of drifted away now, and they didn't like the film at all. They really hated the movie, and it felt like they were trying to make me dislike the film too. And because of all that, because of all the noise, and I mean noise with a capital N there, surrounding this film, I think I told myself that I disliked it. I told myself that I didn't enjoy this movie. And it wasn't until a couple of months later when it came out on DVD, that I rewatched it. I mean, I saw it twice at the cinema, but I didn't watch it again till, I think it was like April of 2018 or May of 2018, whenever the film came out on DVD. And I remember watching it and enjoying it, and then my family turning to me and saying, "Oh, did you enjoy that again?" And I said to them, no, because I'd convinced myself that I didn't enjoy the film, even so deep down I knew I had enjoyed the film, but it was all this noise surrounding The Last Jedi that made me think that I didn't enjoy the movie. But the thing is, the more I've rewatched this film in recent years, the more it works for me. I'm not saying, right, that this film is flawless. I'm not saying that it's without its problems. But whenever I rewatch the film since 2017, since Christmas 2017, it's worked for me time and time again. Sometimes more than others. Sometimes I rewatch the film and I'm like, okay, I can see the plot holes here. I can see the problems with this movie. But I've never once come away from this film thinking, you know what, that was a bad movie. I've never once come away from this film thinking that. And I hate that I convinced myself that it was a bad movie in 2018 because of social media, and because of the way people speak about this movie, and because of other people in my life who didn't like the film. No, I wish I stuck with my gut, and I wish that I just had my own opinion and stuck with that, because the fact is, and it's not a fact, but the thing is that for me, I love this movie, and I have loved it the more, what am I trying to say here? The more I rewatch it over the past 7 years, the more I love it. I love this film. Again, it's not without its flaws, but to me, this is the best Star Wars movie in the sequel trilogy. And I like The Force Awakens. I mean, I love The Force Awakens. I'm saying I love The Force Awakens. I did like an hour-long review of that film talking about how much I love it. Also criticising Impact with its big missed opportunities, but I love The Force Awakens. And heck, I don't care what anybody says. And I'll talk about this more in the forthcoming weeks to months on this channel, probably in the next couple of weeks actually. I enjoy The Rise of Skywalker. Yes, you can put that on a t-shirt, but also I love The Last Jedi. I love it. You can put that on a t-shirt as well. And I love it for so many reasons. Like I've already said, this is my favourite Star Wars movie of the Star Wars sequel trilogy, because it feels like a proper Star Wars movie in my opinion. It feels like Rian Johnson, who wrote and directed the film, threw everything into it, sometimes for better or for worse, and I'll get onto that a bit later in this review, but it feels like Rian Johnson put his heart and soul into this movie, and I love that about it. I love how it develops the characters we first met in The Force Awakens, and the legacy characters that we've known since we saw them in A New Hope. I love the way this film looks. It's beautiful. I love how there's so much going on in the film, and yes, it does feel long because this is the longest Star Wars movie to date. I know, we're getting new Star Wars movies in the next couple of years, but as of now, as of 2025, this is the longest Star Wars movie to date. But I love how there's so much going on in it. There's not a single bit of this film that, in my opinion, you could take out. Yes, even the Canto Bight stuff, even Finn and Rose's storyline. I enjoy that element of the film, and I love the John Williams musical score. There's so much I love about this movie. And yes, it has its problems, but guess what? So does every other Star Wars movie. Yes, even Empire Strikes Back has its problems. I mean, it's a perfect movie in my opinion, but the reality is, every movie that ever exists in all of time has problems. The idea that people look at A New Hope and say, that is a movie without any problems, is silly to me because, you know, the way people reacted to The Last Jedi still just, it shocks me in ways I cannot comprehend. If you don't like the movie, you don't like the movie. That's fine. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, and all film is subjective. I don't know if you knew that, but all film is subjective, and not everybody has to love the same movie that everybody else loves. You know what I mean? But at the same time, people reacted in this film in a way that I haven't seen with any other movie since this film came out. People were picking this film apart scene by scene by scene. Heck, I even saw one person picking apart frame by frame. I'm like, what are we doing here? This isn't how films are made. Reviewers don't do this. Normal people don't do this. I mean, I'm not a normal person, but I don't do this at the same time. I don't watch a film that I don't like and then start picking it apart frame by frame. You know, Solo is a Star Wars movie I don't enjoy. It just doesn't feel like Star Wars to me, and I'll review it at some point in the forthcoming future, because I haven't reviewed that on this channel yet. I kind of skipped Solo and went straight from Rogue One into A New Hope, or should I say Revenge of the Sith to Rogue One. I just didn't review Solo, but again, I will at some point on this channel. But I don't enjoy Solo as a Star Wars story. Yet, I will talk about my opinion on this channel, and talk about how I don't enjoy the film, but you won't ever see a video of me going, you know, picking the film apart scene by scene by scene and talking about how I dislike it. I might, you know, focus on a couple of scenes when I review Solo in the forthcoming weeks on this channel and talk about those scenes and how they don't work, but I'm not going to do a large video picking apart this film or picking apart Solo bit by bit by bit, because that's not, you know, it's not healthy. That's not also the way you should review movies. That's not what movies are made for. Movies are made for entertainment. And I know that Star Wars means so much to so many people. Look, it means so much to me. I think I've based so much of my life around Star Wars. But at the end of the day, it's just a movie. And I know for so many people, it's more than a movie, for sure. But it seems like there's been this sort of obsession against The Last Jedi ever since it came out. People wanting to completely tear apart everything to do with the film, and not just the film in itself, but everybody who's involved in the movie. I mean, the hate towards Rian Johnson still continues towards this day. I was watching a reviewer review Glass Onion a couple of years ago, and they brought up The Last Jedi, and I was like, why are you bringing up The Last Jedi in this review about Glass Onion? I get that it's made by the same filmmaker, but they're bringing up how The Last Jedi was a tele-made film, and then they started to focus on this one scene in The Last Jedi in their review, and I'm like, what are you doing here? Just review the film that you're talking about. You don't need to talk about Rian Johnson's other movies in this one review. When I reviewed, I don't know, the Indiana Jones movies last year or a couple of years ago now, I didn't go, well, I mean, I would enjoy this movie, but Spielberg also directed Always, and I would enjoy The Last Crusade, but Spielberg also directed Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and look how terrible the scene in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is. No, that's just not how you review films. Like, the hate towards Rian Johnson still continues towards this day, and I don't get it. All it did was write and direct a Star Wars movie that wasn't for everybody. I mean, is that a crime? Not in my opinion. And like, the hate towards Kelly Marie Tran, who played Rose Tico in this film, was ridiculous. I get that people didn't like the Rose character. That's totally fine. You know, I'll talk about this a bit later in this review. Rose is not my favourite character in this movie, and I wish we'd given more to deal with. Yeah, I wish we'd given more to work with in this film. I don't think Rose is a particularly well realised character. I don't hate that character, but I think that character could have been better, is the point I'm making. However, I am not going to blame Kelly Marie Tran for that. I mean, I'm not even going to... Yeah, I'm not going to blame Kelly Marie Tran because I didn't love a character that she played. I would blame Rian Johnson for that, but at the same time, I would maybe criticise Rian Johnson's, you know, decision in writing that character, but I'm not going to send him death threats. People were sending Rian Johnson death threats because of this film, and people were sending Kelly Marie Tran death threats because of this film. But the reality is, Tran was just an actor doing her job. You know, I think she's a big Star Wars fan. I've seen some videos in the past where she's talked about how much she loves the Star Wars galaxy and how excited she was to be part of a Star Wars movie, which is sad to think about now because of the way people reacted to her character and the way they reacted to her. Like I said, they were sending her death threats, which is just... I mean, it breaks your heart. But yeah, at the end of the day, she was just an actor playing the character, and I don't understand why so many people took it out on her. I mean... Criticise Rian Johnson, but also don't take it out on Rian Johnson too much because all he did was write a character. And listen, loads of people have written characters and movies that aren't great. And I don't understand, at the end of the day, I just don't understand why people took this disliking of The Last Jedi to another level. Again, you can dislike the movie, that's fine. It's all subjective. There's Star Wars movies I don't like. I don't like Attack of the Clones, and I don't like Solo. But how many times do you hear me talk about those films on this channel? How many times do you see me make video after 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 video about those films on this channel? The answer is you don't see me make video after video after video after video after video about those films on this channel. And yet there are channels out there which, at the time that this film came out, around the time this film came out, and the year after, and the years after that, that this film came out, it felt like channels were dedicated to talking about how terrible The Last Jedi was. I was like, why? I get that Star Wars means so much to so many people, but can't you just let it go that one Star Wars movie didn't work for you? Can't you just make one video about it, talk about your opinion, and then move on? I just didn't get why so many people react to this film in a way that was unnatural in my opinion. And you know, I love this movie. I truly love it. And I love what they did with Luke Skywalker in this film. I know people didn't like what they did with Luke Skywalker, and again, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, don't forget that, but in my opinion, they made Luke Skywalker more human in this film. The whole thing with the original trilogy is Luke Skywalker is kind of a superhero in that trilogy of movies. He is this legend. He's the legend of Luke Skywalker that they even refer to in this film. And there's that moment, there's that line that Mark Hamill, as Luke Skywalker, says in this movie where he goes, when he says to Rey, what do you expect me to face off against the entire First Order with a laser sword? It's something like that. I might be getting the line of dialogue wrong because I'm terrible at quoting lines of dialogue from movies, but you get the point I'm making. There's one part of the film where Luke Skywalker basically makes a joke about the Luke Skywalker that everybody expected when it came to this movie. And I really love what Rian Johnson did with Luke Skywalker in this film, because it was unexpected and yet perfect in my opinion. In this film, Luke Skywalker becomes... well, in this trilogy, Luke Skywalker becomes the Obi-Wan of this trilogy. It becomes the Yoda of this trilogy. Imagine, right? Imagine if you're a kid watching the entire Star Wars Skywalker saga from the first time, and you watch Yoda in the prequel trilogy be this incredible, you know, Jedi. And then you watch him in Empire Strikes Back, and you're like, okay, what's happened to him? He's not the same Yoda we saw in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. And that is kind of what they did with Luke Skywalker in this movie. I think what they did with Luke Skywalker is perfectly fine, because I think it's great. What am I saying? I think it's great what they did with Luke Skywalker in this film. I love how they show that Luke Skywalker, well, he was afraid of becoming his father. He was afraid of becoming the very thing that he destroyed in the first place in the original trilogy. I love that we see this Luke Skywalker who is scared of his own powers, scared of who he has become, and thinks the Jedi should end. I think that's the perfect choice for the character, because the reality is he was not going to be the same Luke Skywalker that we saw at the end of Return of the Jedi. That's just not... that's not good character writing. You know, Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens are 30 years apart from one another. And the idea that Luke Skywalker didn't change one bit between those 30 years doesn't make any sense when you really think about it. I mean, you're not the same you were 30 years ago. You're not the same you were 20 years ago. You're not the same you were 10 years ago. You're not the same you were 5 years ago. Heck, you're not the same person you were 1 year ago. And if you say you were, well, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. I'm not the same person I was a year ago. Everybody changes, and the idea that Luke Skywalker would be the exact same Luke Skywalker that we saw at the end of Return of the Jedi makes no sense to me. And what I love is that Disney Star Wars, after this movie came out, they did eventually give us that Luke Skywalker that everybody wanted to see in this film in The Mandalorian Season 2. They gave us that Luke Skywalker killing all the droids, all the, what were they called? I forgot what they called off the top of my head now. The Dark Troopers, I think that's what they were called. You know, you see Luke Skywalker with Mark Hamill returning to play the character in that cameo at the end of Mandalorian Season 2, and that's Luke Skywalker, at least from what I gathered, that everyone wanted to see in this film. And it worked in The Mandalorian Season 2 because we only get to see Luke Skywalker do that for what? I think it's about 5 minutes at the most. But I don't think it's even that, actually, now the more I think about it. But I haven't seen The Mandalorian Season 2 in a good couple of years. I'm going to rewatch it soon and talk about it on this channel. But the point I'm making is, the Luke Skywalker that we get to see in The Mandalorian is a Luke Skywalker that everybody wanted. But in my opinion, The Mandalorian, we get to him for the right amount of time. If we got to see an entire movie where Mark Hamill was playing that Luke Skywalker, the legend of Luke Skywalker, I just don't think it would have worked. I don't think that's good storytelling. And quite frankly, I would have been bored of the character if it was just the same Luke Skywalker that we saw in the original trilogy. No, I find the character enthralling in this film because he is a complex character now. He wants to be that Luke Skywalker that he's been before, but he feels like he let his sister down. He feels like he let his best friend down because he almost killed their son because he sensed darkness in him. And I think that's brilliant. The idea that Luke was afraid of history repeating itself and then let history repeat itself because of his fear. I love that he went away to this island and basically became a hermit crab. I love all that because it makes the character far more complicated and it makes for a far more interesting story with Luke in this movie. My computer's trying to speak to me there. It makes for a far more interesting story with Luke in this film because we see him at the start of the movie be this closed off character. He throws his lightsaber that we saw him use in A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. He throws that lightsaber behind him and Rey gives it to him at the start of the film. And then by the end of the film, he's using that lightsaber again. And he does the very thing he joked about doing. He made that sarcastic comment about doing early on in the film. He stands there in front of the First Order with the lightsaber ready to face them down in a scene that always gets me. And what I love about his story in this film is that it shows that he is still the same Luke Skywalker we saw defeat the Empire in A New Hope and in Empire Strikes Back and in Return of the Jedi, but he's different at the same time. He's changed. The years have not been kind on him. And the reality is, that's what would probably happen with a person who is spoken about as a sort of myth, as a legend. It's one of the reasons I enjoyed the latest Indiana Jones film so much, because when you watch the Indiana Jones trilogy and when you watch the Young Indiana Jones series, the reality is, Indiana Jones doesn't stick with many people for too long in any of the things he appears in. Any of the things that the Indiana Jones character appears in. So when you get to Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, the idea that he's alone and depressed makes perfect sense to me. And it makes perfect sense to me that Luke Skywalker could be alone and depressed and want to put aside everything he was because people expect too much of him. People expected too much of him and he expected too much of himself in the end. And his final sacrifice is saving the Resistance and fighting for what is good in this galaxy. And his final sacrifice is that he tricks Kylo Ren as well. He's not actually there. He force projects himself onto the planet Crate, where he faced off against Kylo Ren. And I remember watching that reveal in the cinema, and you find out he's not actually there, and he's actually on Act 2, but he's force projecting himself to Crate. I'm thinking, oh my god, that is brilliant. I did not think the film would take a turn like that, but I'm so glad that it has. I love what they do with Luke Skywalker in this film, and I think he's brilliantly played by Luke Skywalker. I think he's brilliantly played by Mark Hamill in this film. I think this might be Mark Hamill's best performance in the entire Star Wars saga. I know Mark Hamill has spoken about his dislike of what Rian Johnson did with the character of Luke Skywalker in this film. I know Mark Hamill spoke about that quite a bit, about his dissatisfaction with what they did with Luke Skywalker in this film. But the thing is, Mark Hamill, listen, I love him. Whenever Mark Hamill pops up in something, I always smile. But Mark Hamill is an old man now. And sometimes when you get to old age, you get quite, set in stone with your own opinion. You know what I mean? And I think what happened with Mark Hamill when it came to this movie, when it came to the Star Wars sequel trilogy as a whole, because he's not said some very kind things about this trilogy, but I think what happened was he didn't really want the trilogy to happen. He didn't want to come back, but he was convinced to come back because of money and because of the fandom and everything like that. And I think that I'm not sure he would have been happy with any way that they took his character. In all honesty, I might be wrong there, maybe, and I don't want to sound like I'm, shitting on Mark Hamill, because I love Mark Hamill. I think he's an incredible actor. I think he's actually got better as an actor in recent years than he's ever been. But the thing is, yes, he may have disliked what they did with his character in the movie, but it's only an actor's opinion at the end of the day. I've seen videos where it's been touted like Mark Hamill tried to warn us about The Last Jedi, and I'm like, what are we doing here? Are we disliking what they did with Luke Skywalker in this film because of what the actor said? And why are we doing that? Why are we just being sheep? Why are we just saying, oh yeah, I dislike what they did with Luke Skywalker in this film because Mark Hamill disliked it? No, form your own opinion, for goodness sake. Guess what? Actors didn't. Mark Hamill's an actor and he didn't like what they do with his character in this movie. That's totally fine. He's not the first actor to be in a Star Wars movie who didn't like Star Wars, who didn't like what they did with their character in the film. There's plenty of actors in the Star Wars franchise who have criticised the Star Wars franchise. I mean, heck, Harrison Ford doesn't like Star Wars. He's been very vocal about that. When people ask him about Star Wars, he just rolls his eyes and answers the question in a smug and sarcastic way. Yet I don't hear anybody or just tells them to fuck off. I've seen interviews where Harrison Ford just doesn't want to talk about Star Wars because he doesn't get it. And yet I don't see people online saying, well, you know what, I hate the Han Solo character now because Harrison Ford said he didn't like playing the character and he didn't like being in the Star Wars and he only did it for the money. No, people love the Han Solo character, regardless of what Harrison Ford said about that character. Alec Guinness has been very vocal about how he didn't like doing the Star Wars movies and how he had these fan interactions where he said, yeah, I'll sign your poster for A New Hope if you never, ever, ever watch or rewatch A New Hope ever again. And yet, I don't hear people saying, well, Alec Guinness didn't like A New Hope. That means I'm not going to like A New Hope. Ewan McGregor has talked about his time on the Star Wars prequel trilogy and spoken about how his role in those films was to walk into rooms and look around. And how he said he didn't really enjoy doing the second two films in the prequel trilogy because of the response to The Phantom Menace. And yet I don't hear people going, well, Ewan McGregor said that about the Star Wars prequel trilogy. That means I shouldn't like Attack of the Clones or Revenge of the Sith anymore because he didn't enjoy doing those movies. And you know what? I shouldn't like him in those films either because, well, he didn't like the other films too much initially. No, people love Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan. That's one of the big redeeming features coming out of the prequel trilogy that everybody seems to really like. I mean, I could go on and on. Natalie Portman has spoken about her dissatisfaction with doing the Star Wars prequel trilogy and how she's never going to show those films to her kids. And yet, over the recent years, there's been the resurgence of love for the character of Padme in the prequel trilogy. Something I don't quite understand, but nevertheless, there is that resurgence of love for that character. I mean, again, I could go on and on and on. The reality is, people in the Star Wars franchise have spoken about their dissatisfaction, their disliking with certain choices that the characters have made, or the Star Wars movies the Star Wars movies that they've been in, and yet people still love those movies. And the idea that people are disliking the character of Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi because of what Mark Hamill said about because of Mark Hamill's opinion on what they did with the Luke Skywalker character in this film is completely and utterly stupid. And stupid with a capital S. Why are you disliking what they did with Luke Skywalker in this film because Mark Hamill didn't like it? Guess what? Mark Hamill is an actor. He has his own opinions, and that's great. I love Mark Hamill. I'm not having a go on Mark Hamill at all. I love him, and I respect his opinion on what they did with Luke Skywalker in this film. I respect his opinion totally, but it is only his opinion at the end of the day, and my opinion is different, and that's totally fine. I'm not going to change my opinion just because I've heard what Mark Hamill said about the character. I love what they did with Luke Skywalker character in this film. I don't understand why so many people don't like it. It fits perfectly with the character that we see him. It fits perfectly with Luke Skywalker, the character that we see in the original trilogy, and I think it makes for a more interesting character when you get to the sequel trilogy. If Luke Skywalker is the exact same character we saw him as at the end of Return of the Jedi, then in my opinion, it would not make for good storytelling. It would be quite boring to watch, and it would probably mean that Luke Skywalker was the least interesting character when it comes to this film. Yes, he might be doing some cool lightsaber type stuff if he was the exact same character we saw him as at the end of Return of the Jedi, but I don't think character-wise he would have been nearly as interesting as he turned out to be. The reality is, people who dislike that character still clearly found him interesting because they spoke about him a hell of a lot. They still found engagement with that character. And you can tell that when you can see all the videos made about how much people dislike that character online. You know, clearly they were engaged in that character still, regardless of whether they liked that character or not. And I think that is good. Regardless of if you disliked or liked the character, Rian Johnson made a great character because he made people talk about that character again. Hearing all the debate about what Rian Johnson did with that character shows that he made a character worth talking about. You know what I mean? Hopefully you do. I don't know how much I'm making sense in this review today because I don't know if you can tell, I'm quite bummed up because hay fever's going to be quite badly right now. So yeah, don't know how much I'm making sense in this review today, but the point I'm making, at least the point I think I'm making, is that Rian Johnson made a great character regardless of whether you liked what he did with that character, because people were talking about that character and are still talking about what he did to that character all these years later. And I think that tells you that he made the right decisions. Whether you agree with them or not, I think he made the right decisions regardless, because, yeah, that is a character we're still talking about to this day. And another bit talking point with The Last Jedi was Rey being a nobody. And I know they reversed that in The Rise of Skywalker, but I'm not going to talk about that just yet. I'll talk about that more when I review The Rise of Skywalker and how Rey ends up becoming a Palpatine when you get to that movie. But as for this film, again, notwithstanding The Rise of Skywalker, as for this film, I love that Rey is a nobody. Because everybody in this, well, you know, I'm guilty of this as well. I remember watching theory video after theory video before the film came out thinking, oh, Rey's going to turn out to be a Kenobi in this movie. Oh, that's exciting. Oh, I can't wait till that happen. I remember at one point thinking, is Rey going to turn out to be a Skywalker? And is Luke going to think, is she going to be Luke's daughter? And that's going to be a twist when we see them together in this movie. But the thing is, she turns out to be a nobody. And at first, when that happened in the movie, when I first watched the film, I was like, oh, I'm not sure how I feel about that. But the more I think about it, and the more I rewatch this film, the more I love that decision. To the point that when I rewatched it the other day for this review today, for preparation for this review today, and the way it was reviewed, I was like, oh, that's genius the way he did that. Because she is getting close to that sort of mirror reflection thing in the cave. And then she puts a hand on it, and you can see this shadow walking up to her, and it's meant to be like someone is being revealed to be her parent, and or parents, and there's two shadow figures walking up to her. Then it morphs into one. You're like, oh, who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? Is it going to be Obi-Wan? Is it going to be Luke? Is it going to be Han? Is it going to be Leia? And then it turns out to be herself. I love the way Rian Johnson did that. Because it's toying with us, as Star Wars fans. We all expected somebody to be the shadow that wasn't her, but instead it ended up being her. And I love that she is a nobody. Because it means that all of us who are nobodies in life, it makes us think that we can be Jedis as well. We can be like her. We can have our own power. We can have our own power because we've got no lineage. We don't have to be part of a royal family or part of a wealthy family or part of a particular family that is well known in order to be something special. No, we can just be who we are and still be something special. And I love that's what Rian Johnson says with, well, that's what I feel like Rian Johnson is saying with the choice of Rey being a nobody in this film, because she still rises up to be something special, and yet she doesn't come from anywhere. She doesn't come, well, she does, as we know from The Rise of Skywalker, but as for this film, like I said, I'm not really talking about how they reverse in The Rise of Skywalker, but as for this film, I love how they just go, yeah, Rey's a nobody, and yet she's still someone special. Because prior to this, the story's always been about, we have to be a Skywalker in order to be something special, we have to have a connection to a Skywalker, yet, we get to this one, it's like, oh, not necessarily. What about every person who's a nobody? And they end up becoming the so-called chosen one. So I love what they did with Rey in this film, and I love how they develop her character. I think Daisy Ridley's performance in this film, and I think she's really good in The Force Awakens, but I think she gives a better performance in the film. I think she's brilliant in Rise of Skywalker, regardless of what you think of that movie. I think Daisy Ridley's wonderful in Rise of Skywalker, and I think she's wonderful in this film too. I love all the stuff with Rey and Finn, not Rey and Finn, sorry. God, that's where my head's at right now. It's scrumbled because of hay fever. I hate this time of the year, but I love all the stuff they do with Rey and Luke Skywalker on the Ahch-To island in this movie. I love all that, and I love that they filmed that on location, or they filmed so much of that on location, because you can tell, like when the waves are crashing up against the rocks, it feels real. And that's, I was watching this film, I'm like, I'm missing that from some Star Wars recently. Not all Star Wars. Andor filmed a lot on location, and you can tell that when you watch Andor seasons 1 and 2. But in The Mandalorian, in particular, if you're going to focus on that example, but also is a case with the Book of Boba Fett and the Ahsoka TV show as well, you know, they film a lot on the volume, which are kind of these, I'm oversimplifying it here, but these virtual reality sets. Again, oversimplifying it, but that's kind of what they are. And it doesn't have the same effect than when you're filming on location. And I think what The Last Jedi does so well is you can really feel the location filming when it comes to the movie. You can tell that this is an expensive movie, and in all the best ways, because it would not be cheap to film on the island, you know, the Ahch-To island. It's got a name, but it's an island in Scotland somewhere. It might be an island, actually. Wherever it is, it's not cheap to film on the island. My dad knew exactly where it was, and I remember him telling me about that and how it's difficult to get to the island, and you can only get to the island at one time in the year as well. So it would not have been cheap to film where they were filming, particularly for the Rey and Luke Skywalker section of this movie. But I think it pays off. I love the way all the stuff looks on that island. I think having that sense of realism on the island reinforces the verisimilitude when it comes to the movie. We've done that word, verisimilitude, I can't speak apparently. Verisimilitude means, look it up. I love the verisimilitude I love how this film is grounded in its own verisimilitude. That's what I was trying to say there. And I love the set and the production design when it comes to this movie. You know, this movie looks expensive. I heard a report, and I don't know how true it is, but I heard a report, or should I say, I read a report, that this is apparently one of the most expensive movies of all time. Again, I don't know how true it is. And if it is one of the most expensive movies of all time, then I'm kind of surprised by that. But it looks like an expensive movie nonetheless. It looks like a movie that cost about $200 million, probably more. I mean, there's a report out there that it cost almost $500 million to make. I don't know how true that is, but if it did, wow, I don't know what they spent all that money on. Maybe the marketing, I don't know. Anyway, the point I'm making is, though, it looks like an expensive movie. And I've spoken about this on the channel in the past. When a movie has a big budget, I love when you can tell that. And there is so much that you can see on screen with the budget in this movie. This movie looks expensive. I mean, right from the opening sequence, there is this space battle where the CGI looks phenomenal, in my opinion. The CGI in the opening sequence of this movie is great, and I totally believe that Poe Dameron is flying in his X-Wing and trying to distract the First Order as Resistance goes away, but then how you get this space battle in the Resistance and the First Order. And then all the stuff in Canto Bight, regardless of what you think of that storyline, regardless of what you think of Finn and Rose's storyline, I love how that looks expensive, or the costume design, the production design in that storyline. And then as the film continues, I love the space battles that you see that keep happening throughout the film. Admiral Holdo flying, using light speed to fly through and split that one First Order ship in half. And then you get the Battle of Crate towards the end of this movie, which looks incredible in my opinion. I think they filmed that on location somewhere, God knows where. But all the, I love the way this film looks. It looks expensive and it's beautiful to look at as well. It's a beautifully shot movie. And again, there was so much else that I enjoy about this film. Other things that I'll get to later on in this review. However, the film isn't without its flaws. Like I said before, I'm not going to sit here and say it's flawless, because I don't love the Admiral Holdo storyline. I love Alderan. I like that character, but she kind of feels like a wasted character. And I get why there'd be a mutiny going on at this point in the Resistance. I kind of like the whole idea. I just don't love the execution. So yeah, that's one problem I would probably have with this movie. I don't hate that storyline. I don't sit there when Admiral Holdo comes on screen going, well, here we go again. No, I like Lord Dern playing that character, and there are parts of that storyline I like. I like Admiral Holdo's fate. I like how she goes out saving the Resistance. But I don't love how it's all executed. I don't love how most of her storyline is executed. All this stuff with the mutiny, I think could have been done better and more clearer. You know, for the first several times that I've rewatched this film, and I've rewatched this film quite a lot, by the way, I've seen it at least 20 times, but for the first several times that I rewatched this film, I haven't quite got my head around what the storyline. I didn't quite get my head around what was going on there, and it wasn't until like a couple of years ago when I finally got my head around that storyline. So yeah, I don't love the Admiral Holdo stuff in the film. I don't love Finn and Rose's storyline. That being said, I enjoy it. I don't care what anybody says. I enjoy that storyline. I know it may be pointless, although I don't think it is pointless, because I think that's, you know, their storyline is the reason that Poe takes so long to confront Admiral Holdo, making it so her plan furthers. I enjoy Finn and Rose's storyline, but I do think it could have been done better, and I do think that it could have been more integral as well, because Finn is a main character. You could even argue he is the main character in The Force Awakens, and yet here he is sidelined. His character is not nearly as important as it was in The Force Awakens, and I do kind of wish that wasn't the case. I still don't care what anybody says. I enjoy the Canto Bight storyline. It may be shaky in parts, and the CGI and the feathers, I think that's what they're called, the fatty hairs, whatever they're called. It doesn't look great at times, but I enjoy that storyline for what it is. I really like it, and yeah, I enjoy watching that storyline as well because of John Boyega and Kelly Tran's performances. However, I do wish that storyline was more integral overall, because we spend a lot of time with that storyline and we don't necessarily need to. And my other big problem with this film is the ending. I'm not necessarily the big fan of battle. I think that all works. Or not Luke Skywalker's fate. I love that they kill Luke Skywalker off in this movie. It makes perfect sense that his final sacrifice, as I already said, is that he saves the Resistance and he saves his sister. However, I don't love the last couple of minutes of the film. Particularly the last shot that we see of the Resistance, all the Millennium Falcon together. Because it's like, where do you go from there? Where do you go from that shot? The Resistance can all fit on the Millennium Falcon, which, as we've seen from previous Star Wars movies, isn't the biggest of all the spaceships that we see in the Star Wars movies. So it's like, okay, where do we go from there? The Resistance is that small by the end of this movie. How are they going to defeat the First Order when it comes to the next movie? It just doesn't really work. And in my opinion, and I don't know if this was the case, but it kind of feels like Rian Johnson set the 9th film up for failure a little bit, because you had to get around that plot hole of the Resistance literally all fitting on the same shot that looks like the ending of one of those sort of what am I trying to say here? One of those sorts of comedies where you get a laugh track, you know, from like the 70s or the 80s. That one shot looks like the end of one of the last shot out of one of those family comedies from the 80s. Yeah, the Resistance can all feel that one shot, and yet the person who makes the next movie, because it wasn't confirmed by the point that this film had come out, it wasn't confirmed that J.J. Abrams was going to direct the next film. It's actually going to be Colin Trevorrow, who directed Jurassic World and the third Jurassic World film, and I'll talk about that more when I review Rise of Skywalker in the forthcoming weeks on this channel. But it kind of felt like whoever was going to direct the next film had to work around that plot hole, because most of the Resistance is defeated when it gets to the end of this film. And again, it kind of feels like Rian Johnson just went, you know what, this trilogy doesn't have a plan, so I'm going to make it quite difficult for the next filmmaker to work around the fact that there's not much of the Resistance left. And I don't love that. I kind of wish, and I swear at one point I saw this was going to be the case, but I can't find any evidence for it nonetheless. I swear at one point Rian Johnson was meant to direct the 9th Star Wars movie as well. And I might be the only person in the world who thinks this and who wanted this, but I wish he directed Episode 9. I would love to see Rian Johnson's version of Star Wars Episode 9. I would have loved that because of what he did with this film. Because he makes so many decisions where it's like, okay, how is the next film going to follow all this up? And I love all that. I love that he twists expectations. Like Snoke, who is like the Palpatine figure of this new trilogy, is killed off in the second movie. The Palpatine figure should be killed off in the third film. So I love that he does that. And I love that it's Kylo Ren who kills him. Again, mirroring Darth Vader killing Palpatine in Return of the Jedi. But that happens in the third film in the original trilogy. And in this trilogy, it happens in the second film. I love all that sort of subverting expectations. That's not the only case. But the whole of Luke Skywalker. Again, it's subverting expectations. But because he subverted so many expectations, I would have loved to seen his take on the third film in this trilogy. And of course, we don't get that. We got J.J. Abrams' take, and as good as J.J. Abrams is as a filmmaker, as much as I like him, he's the king of setup and not necessarily the king of concluding things. But I'll talk about that more when I get to my review of The Rise of Skywalker in the near future. But going back onto what I was saying with The Last Jedi, I just don't love the idea that the Resistance can all fit on one ship. I think that there should have been a lot more Resistance members left at the end of this movie, and they should have given us a line or something that explained where the Resistance went at the end of this film, because they flew off into the distance, and then the next movie, at the beginning of the next movie, the Resistance have a new base on a new planet. It's like, okay, how did you get all these more Resistance members in the space of a year or two, you know, in the gap between The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker? It doesn't make total sense, that to me. And again, there are other parts of The Last Jedi that I don't particularly love either. There's some jokes which I'm like, okay, that didn't land the best way. And I do feel like it doesn't quite dive into some of the themes it explores. Like Benicio del Toro's character in the movie brings up this quite interesting idea that is there a good side or is there a bad side? But it isn't explored nearly as much as I would have liked to be explored. Because that is an interesting idea. That is there actually a good side or a bad side in the film? What side are you really on? You know, if you're the first or if you're somebody who wants to, if you're an arms dealer, that's what I was trying to get to there. If you're an arms dealer, well, you might deal to the good side and the bad side. And in your opinion, either side is as bad as one another because they both need weapons from you. And so, yeah, there's interesting ideas touched on, but not necessarily explored as much as I would have liked them to be in the subplots. However, I'm not going to dwell on all the problems that this movie may have, because, guess what? There are problems with every Star Wars movie, as I've already mentioned. There are so many problems with A New Hope, yet people talk about it as if it's like the Bible, if it's like a sacred film, when, listen, you can love A New Hope. I understand its importance. Listen, I really like A New Hope. I've got no beef with it, for lack of a better phrase. But the thing is, A New Hope has a lot of problems. Like, Luke Skywalker, sorry, this is where my head's at. Darth Vader and Obi-Wan's duel in that film is terrible. It's aged awfully. If that duel came out today, people would be ripping it to shreds, like they did with some of the duels in the sequel trilogy. Like, people have been pausing some of the lightsaber duels in the sequel trilogy, frame by frame by frame. And I'm like, guys, did you not watch Obi-Wan and Darth Vader's duel in A New Hope? I mean, that's awful. And yeah, some of the dueling in the sequel trilogy may need a better choreograph. I'm not going to argue there, but if it's entertaining and it moves at a fast pace, it doesn't bother me so much because I can get past that. Whilst with A New Hope, the lightsaber duel is slow and has a lot of holes in it. And it's not just a lightsaber duel. As a film, it also has problems. Like Luke Skywalker, he's a person who lives on a desert farm all by himself, well, with his aunt and his uncle, doesn't have much contact with the outside world, and yet by the end of that movie, he's an expert flying an X-Wing, and he can easily blow up the Death Star. It's like, what about all those other X-Wing pilots that we've seen on Yavin 4? Are they, and how easily they were defeated? Like Porkins. Porkins is so easily defeated, and yet he's a pilot, this X-Wing pilot who's been on Yavin 4 for as long as I can remember, and yet, again, he's so easily defeated. But Luke Skywalker, who, as far as we're aware by this point, because we're not given loads of information about it before we meet him in this film, has never flown an X-Wing in his life before this, and yet can easily blow up the Death Star, or can almost easily blow up the Death Star, you know? And Old-One, when it's blown up, we don't get to know about anybody who lives on Old-One in A New Hope. We don't get to know about the people of Old-One, about the children, about the mothers, about the fathers of Old-One. We don't get to see Senator Bail Organa ever again, even though he lives on Old-One. And yet it's blown up in that film, and we move on. And if A New Hope came out today, people are like, why do we get to see more of Old-One? Why do we not get to see the people of Old-One? Because that would make the blowing up of Old-One so much more effective. And I know people complained about the death of Admiral Ackbar when it comes to this movie, how they kind of skim over it, like he's on the same ship as Leia, then that blows up, and Leia is the only character to survive her side or her part of the ship being blown up. And Admiral Ackbar is kind of thrown aside. He doesn't have a proper send-off. But the reality is, I know in our bubbles, in our Star Wars bubbles, Admiral Ackbar is a fan favourite character. Listen, I love Admiral Ackbar. I've got an Admiral Ackbar Funko Pop back there. I don't know how I can see it. But again, I love Admiral Ackbar. But he's a fan favourite. He is not a beloved character that is going to go down in history like, say, Obi-Wan Kenobi or Luke Skywalker, characters which are ingrained into pop culture. I know his famous quote from Return of the Jedi, "It's a trap," is ingrained into pop culture, but again, his character isn't necessarily. And having him have a big send-off, I don't know, I'm not saying I would have been against that, but it might have felt a bit unnatural. And the idea that he's on the ship, we see him very briefly at the start of the film, and then he dies, it's fine with me. And again, I love the character of Admiral Ackbar. I love him, really do. Got so much Admiral Ackbar figures in this house right now. But you know, we don't get to see Senator Bail Organa again before Obi-Wan blows up. Why would we need to see Admiral Ackbar again? I mean, Senator Bail Organa actually has quite a big role in the Star Wars timeline, particularly with Andor Season 2 out. But yeah, we don't get to see him again before Obi-Wan blows up, so it's fine with me that we don't get to see Admiral Ackbar again before he's death in this film. It actually kind of makes perfect sense to me that he would just die and we don't get to see him die, because I think that's kind of more effective in a way, that this character which we've known and loved is just cut off like that. It's like, oh, wow, this film's taking risks that I didn't expect it to. And on risks, I love what they do with Snoke in this film. Again, I've already briefly spoken about it, but I love that everyone after The Force Awakens was theorising that he's going to be like the Palpatine figure of this trilogy. He's going to be like the Emperor figure in this trilogy. And then in the second film, it's cut off just like that. And regardless of whether you like this film or not, and again, it's all subjective. If you dislike this film, let's have a respectful debate about it. But regardless of what you may think of this film and the decisions that this film makes, you cannot argue that the CGI they used to bring Snoke to life is still, I mean, it still looks amazing. I don't know how they did that. I think it's something to do with motion capture technology, because it was Andy Serkis who plays Snoke, and if you didn't know already, Andy Serkis is obviously well versed in motion capture technology. He played Gollum in the Lord of the Rings trilogy and in the first Hobbit film. He plays King Kong in Peter Jackson's 2005 King Kong film. He plays Caesar in the most recent Planet of the Apes trilogy. He is very well versed in motion capture technology. And I think he did the same sort of stuff when it comes to this film. But it still looks phenomenal. The way Snoke looks and the way he's played by Andy Serkis. I never feel like I'm watching Andy Serkis by that character. Sometimes I can't get my head around the fact that Andy Serkis is playing Snoke in this film. Because he doesn't sound like Andy Serkis, and Andy Serkis fully throws himself into that character. Yes, I love the way Snoke looks in this film, and I love the way he's used. I love that he's used as another sort of milestone in Kylo Ren's journey to becoming, well, the supreme leader. I love that. And I love the duel. I love when you see Kylo Ren and Rey team up and fight all of Snoke's guards. I think that sequence is great. Again, yeah, you could probably pause it frame by frame or moment by moment and pick apart problems with that whole duel sequence. But that doesn't bother me, because when I'm watching the sequence play out in the time that is playing out in the movie, it's exciting to watch. I think it's well done, and that's good enough to me. You know, if you wanted to pause it bit by bit, if you wanted to pause the duel between Anakin and Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith, a film which is somehow beloved now. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like Revenge of the Sith quite a lot, but it's got a lot of big problems. And the idea that it's this sort of classic in cinema history, I'm not sure it's a total truth, you know? I don't fully go with that. Again, I really like Revenge of the Sith. I think it's a good movie. I just don't know if it's a great movie that should go down in history as one of the greatest movies of all time, if you follow my thinking. But in Revenge of the Sith, you see the duel between Anakin and Obi-Wan, and if you pick apart that duel bit by bit, I mean, there's one bit where they're just waving their lightsabers and the lightsabers aren't even touching each other. It's like, okay. And yet people don't talk about that bit in Revenge of the Sith and the duel in Revenge of the Sith nearly as much as they talk about some of the problems in the duel in Snoke's throne room in this film. So yeah, that doesn't really bother me. I think the whole throne room sequence is great. And I like what they do with Poe in this film. I like that Poe is more of a loose cannon when it comes to the movie. I will say Miss Snap. Snap's not in this film. This is the only sequel trilogy movie that Snap is not in. He's in Force Awakens and he's in Rise of Skywalker. He dies in Rise of Skywalker. Spoiler there in case you haven't seen the movie. I know a lot of people were quite sad to hear that Snap died in that film. He's not a big character in the sequel trilogy, but he could have been. It's the point I'm making if he was in this film. So, although I kind of joked that I wish Snoke Snoke. Although I kind of wish that, although kind of joke that Snap isn't in this movie, I wish that he was, because it would have made his death in the third film in this trilogy more effective. So I don't like that Snap's not there, but I like how Poe Dameron is developed in this movie. I like all the character development in this film. I love how Leia is used. I love the scene between Luke and Leia, because although we are told in Return of the Jedi that Luke and Leia are brother and sister, I never felt it with that movie. Yet in The Last Jedi, when we see that one scene between Luke and Leia, I totally believe that they're brother and sister. I totally believe it. Maybe that's because of the bond and the connection between Mark Hamill and the late great Carrie Fisher, which Mark Hamill has often spoken about. But when I see that scene in this movie, I'm always like, yeah, now I get it. I didn't get it before this, but now I get that those two are brother and sister. And that always worked in that scene. And I love Leia in this movie. Again, it's bittersweet watching her in this film. It's bittersweet watching the late great Carrie Fisher play her, because obviously she's no longer with us. So it's a similar... I had a similar experience rewatching this film as I did rewatching The Force Awakens, and watching the late great Carrie Fisher in this film and thinking, oh, it's so sad that she's no longer here, because, yeah, I love Leia in this movie. I will say, to this day, I don't quite understand all the stuff with Leia going into space and surviving. I'm not sure if all of that works. Again, I'm not saying The Last Jedi is a perfect movie. I'm not. I'm just saying I enjoy it a hell of a lot, and I can pick problems with it as well. You're allowed to do that. And one of my other problems, I suppose, would be the way that Leia's almost death is done in this movie. Because I remember when that first happened, I was like, oh my god, they just killed off Leia. Wow. And then she's not dead, and she's using the Force to stay alive. Staying alive. Sorry, that song just came in my head as I said that. But yeah, I'm not sure if the Leia scene quite works. Still, I think it's well executed, and I think it's well executed because of the John Williams musical score in the background. You get this grand orchestral version of Princess Leia's theme, you know, da 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 da. That's actually not Han Solo and Leia's theme from Empire Strikes Back. It's da 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 da. I mean, I can't really sing the theme too well, clearly, but I love how you get this grand orchestral version of Princess Leia's theme playing when she is using the Force. I'm guessing that's what she's doing in space. It's something like that. I've never quite understood that scene. And maybe that's because I'm dumb, but I never quite understood that scene. But I love the way the John Williams music is using that scene, and I love the execution of that scene, how it's directed. And sticking on the topic of the John Williams musical score, because I have to dedicate a segment of all of my Star Wars reviews. I have to dedicate a segment of all my Star Wars reviews to the John Williams musical score. I, surprise, 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 love the John Williams musical score to this movie. In my opinion, this is the best musical score he did to any of the Star Wars sequel movies. I love the new themes, much like The Force Awakens. I love the new themes in the score, and I love how the classic themes are used. I love in that scene between Luke and Leia, which I've already spoken about how much I love, how you get Luke and Leia's theme from Return of the Jedi return there. I love how you get Yoda's theme return when you have that little cameo from Yoda, which I love, by the way. I love that Yoda scene. I'll talk about it very briefly in this review. Man alive, you've gone on quite a long time with this review already, but I'm gonna go on even longer. Yes. Here we go. Anyway, I love the John Williams musical score, and I particularly love the new themes, such as "The Rebellion is Reborn." Dun, da 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 dun, da 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 dun, da 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 ba ba bum bum. I love that theme. Perfectly captures this movie, and I love the theme for Finn and Rose. Well, I should really call it Rose's theme. You know, da 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 da. It captures the heart of this movie, in my opinion. And yeah, I love the John Williams musical score because it keeps the movie more moving forward. I don't know what this movie would be like without that John Williams musical score. I'm not sure it would quite work, in all honesty. But the fact remains that John Williams musical score is an integral ingredient in this movie, and I think it works wonders. Yes, John Williams once again did an absolutely fantastic job when it came to scoring this film. Every bit of this score sounds like Star Wars to me. You know, and in all the right ways. And this film screams Star Wars to me. Maybe not as much as, say, Return of the Jedi or Empire Strikes Back, but to me, when I watch this film, it's got all the ingredients of a great Star Wars movie in there. Henceforth, why I think it's a great Star Wars movie. And I love the Yoda scene. I love how Yoda's used in this movie. I saw some reviewers, and again, I'm not going to name names because I respect these reviewers that I follow online, these movie pundits that I follow online. But I saw some reviewers saying, oh, Yoda doesn't act the same way he does in Empire Strikes Back. And I'm like, I watched Empire Strikes Back a couple of weeks ago. Yoda acts the same way in Empire Strikes Back as he does in this movie. Like, he's still the little, you know, sort of... jokey, that's not the right word, is it? It's not a little cheeky, for lack of a better phrase, cheeky Yoda that we saw in Empire Strikes Back, but also the mindful Yoda. I love the Yoda scene in this movie. Right. And I love that Yoda is puppeted, because he wasn't puppeted in the prequel trilogy, and the prequel trilogy was made after the original trilogy, but they brought Frank Oz, who puppeted and voiced Yoda in the original trilogy, to come back and puppet Yoda. I don't know why I'm doing that for puppeted. But anyway, he came back to puppet and voice Yoda in this film, which makes for a more effective scene, in my opinion. Yeah, I love how Yoda's done in this movie. Love it. Is there anything else that I'm forgetting which people have often moaned about when it comes to the movie? Is there any other controversial bit of... I mean, I've heard some people call the first half of this film shaky. I don't get that. I think it moves at a great pace. I mean, the film opens with this great battle sequence in space, which puts the Star Wars in Star Wars. That's something I complained about in some other previous Star Wars movies, where it's like, where are the space battles? Where are those exciting space battles we're missing from previous Star Wars movies? Yeah, Rian Johnson just goes, you know what, we're going to open this Star Wars movie with Star Wars and already tick that box off in a way that it's so exciting with the John Williams musical score roaring in the background. Gotta love the way this movie opens. What about the use of hooks? So we go into that. The use of General Hux, once again, played by Donald Gleeson when it comes to this movie. I love Donald Gleeson as an actor. I think he's great. General Hux, I think, is less threatening in this film than he was in The Force Awakens. In that Force Awakens, he gives that very Nazi-like speech at one point, which is very memorable. But in this movie, he doesn't have anything like that. He's still threatening at times, but he's made it more of a goof, and he's made as more of an adversary. Is that the word? I don't know. An adversary? Is that it? Anyway, whatever the word is, he's made as more of a foil. Is that the right word? I'm not sure. He's made as more of a foil for Kylo Ren to sort of bounce off. There is some good moments with Hux in this movie, but I wish that Hux was better. And I do feel that's perhaps one of the mistakes to not make Hux more threatening, because then if they did make him more threatening, they wouldn't have had to bring in Richard E. Grant when it comes to the 9th movie, because it kind of feels like Richard E. Grant is filling in the role of Hux because this movie softened Hux. But I still like Hux in this movie, and that's not a big criticism, because Hux isn't a major role in this film. So I've heard people complain at length about Hux, and I'm like, he's fine in my opinion in this movie. I mean, could they have done the character a bit better? But, you know, again, not a big thing in my opinion, because I think the movie is so well made, and I love that it has so much in it. Literally, this is the Star Wars movie that has the most going on. You've got somebody being trained to be a Jedi by Luke flipping Skywalker of all people. You've got a scene with Yoda. You've got Leia, well, General Leia at that, with the Resistance. And then you've got this military going on the Resistance. You've got the First Order constantly chasing after the Resistance in this space battle that you keep going back to throughout the film. You've got sacrifices happening in the Resistance with Admiral Holdo. You've got this subplot where Finn and Rose are, are trying to free these animals that are being tortured on this planet. Then you've got this subplot where they're trying to stop the weapons and shut down one of the First Order ships, if I've got that storyline correct. Again, I've been going on for so long that I might have got the storyline slightly incorrect with Finn and Rose. But you got that going on in the subplot. You got this awesome scene between Captain Phasma and Finn where they're fighting each other, which was kind of set up in The Force Awakens. I mean, it wasn't kind of set up, it was set up in The Force Awakens. And you end with this big, epic, and I mean epic with a capital E, battle at the end of the movie on Crate, which is such a good way to end this movie. Honestly, I do sometimes think if this was the end of the story of the sequel trilogy, then I would have been fine. And I'm not somebody who hates The Rise of Skywalker, I don't. But Rise of Skywalker kind of feels inconsequential at the end of this movie, because you're like, oh, you've had the big war between the Resistance and the First Order, and you're going to have another one? I don't know, it just doesn't make the war at the end of Rise of Skywalker feel as consequential, whilst the big battle that we see at the end of this movie feels consequential because everything in the movie has been leading to that, everything in the movie has been building up to that. And I love that you see Luke Skywalker face off against the First Order by himself, because it plays on our expectations, what we expected from Luke Skywalker in this movie, and also harks back to something early on in the film. There's foreshadowing that happens to that early on in the movie, and I love how this film rounds up with Luke Skywalker saying that I will not be the Last Jedi, the Resistance is not dead, and the war has only just begun as the Resistance escape onto Millennium Falcon off the planet Crate. I love all that. I love again how it also harks back to something early on in the movie where Luke asks Rey, what do you think the Force is? And she goes, oh, it's something you can, it's where you can move objects, and it often makes people, it often, what am I trying to say here? It often she basically sums up what she thinks the Force is, but badly. And then Luke says to Rey, it's amazing, everything you said in that sentence is wrong. And then he says that to Kylo Ren at the end of the film when the Resistance are escaping, and he's been the reason that the Resistance have escaped, and he says to Kylo Ren, and it's my favourite line in this film, he says to Kylo Ren, see you around, kid. And every time I watch this film, I get chills when he says that. Even though it's not really paid off in The Rise of Skywalker, I think one of the problems with Rise of Skywalker, amongst many other problems of the movie, is that you should have had, Luke messing about with Kylo Ren's mind in that film, with how Kylo Ren doesn't defeat him in this movie, if you follow what I'm saying. You just had Luke messing with him, and, Kylo Ren not being able to defeat Luke, haunting him in that film. And I think that would have worked better. I think the last line you hear from Luke in this film would have been better if that was the case, if you follow my thinking. Again, I'm not sure how much making sense, because I've been going on for so long now on hay fever. I keep holding it back, but it's starting to get to me more now. The more I hold it back, the more it wants to fight back. But the point I'm making is, regardless of how the next film follows that lineup, I just love that final line from Luke Skywalker in the movie. See you around, kid. And I love how his death scene is done with the 2 moons on Act 2, and then the sunset as well on Act 2, and then he just descends into nothing. Very similar to the way Obi-Wan dies in A New Hope. Yeah, there's probably things I'm forgetting. I mean, there always is when I come to do these Star Wars reviews. I always notice I've forgotten to mention something when I get to the end of these Star Wars reviews. But I don't care what anybody says. I love this movie, and I think it's a great Star Wars movie. Is it my favourite Star Wars movie? No. Do I think it's perfect? No. And do I have some problems with it? Yes. But that's okay. You're allowed to have some problems with the movie and still really enjoy it. And heck, I don't just really enjoy it, I thoroughly enjoy this film. Every time I watch it, I am smiling like that kid I was all the way back in Christmas of 2017, when I was watching this film for the first time, and all that shit, and I mean shit with a capital S, that had happened to me in the year leading up to seeing this movie escaped my mind, and this movie felt like it was the light at the end of the tunnel, and in all the best ways. It was the Star Wars movie that I didn't know I wanted come Christmas 2017. It was a Star Wars movie which made me count down the days till I saw The Rise of Skywalker and was ultimately disappointed by that film. But it was a Star Wars movie nonetheless that got me thinking about it in all the ways you want to think about a movie. It got me discussing this film with almost everybody I knew who saw it, which again is what you want from any movie. And sorry if you heard some sound interference there. This loud Lloyd just went past as I said that. But the point I'm making is, it's a Star Wars, it's a movie which gets you thinking, which gets you talking, and which gets you debating. And you may not like the film, but the fact is, so many people today, still to today, are debating this movie. And that is a good sign. That Rian Johnson made a movie, and not just a movie, a Star Wars movie that got people talking in a way, and got people debating in a way that I'm not sure any other Star Wars movie has. Now, I know that hasn't always been for the best, because, well, look at some of the responses to this movie. Some of the responses are just plain toxic. If you don't like the film, that's fine, but let's respectfully debate it, I will respectfully debate Solo or Attack of the Clones with anyone who defends those movies. But if you just, if you're one of those gatekeepers who say, if you like The Last Jedi, you're not a proper Star Wars fan, just shut up. Just shut up. I hate gatekeepers when it comes to Star Wars. I've heard this said in the past. I'm not the first person to come up with this. But Star Wars as a franchise is like a restaurant. It's like what am I trying to say? It's like a menu at a restaurant. I've heard this analogy in the past. It's like a menu at a restaurant. There's going to be some things on the menu you love, some things on the menu you just like, and some things on the menu which aren't for you. And that's totally fine. Everyone's allowed to like the Star Wars movie they want, and everybody's allowed to enjoy the Star Wars that they enjoy. I don't understand why it has to be gatekeeper when it comes to this franchise. Just because you might have been around when A New Hope came out in 1977 doesn't make you any more or any less of a Star Wars fan. It just means you were around when that movie came out and you were a Star Wars fan all the way back then, and you still might be a Star Wars fan now. But, I wasn't born when The Phantom Menace came out. I was around when Attack of the Clones came out and Revenge of the Sith came out, but I didn't see them until I was like 5 years after they came out. But just because I didn't see those movies till a bit after they came out doesn't make me any less of a Star Wars fan. The idea that I am less of a Star Wars fan because I like The Last Jedi is the stupidest and dumbest thing I have ever heard in my life. Or one of them, actually. That may be a bit of an over-exaggeration there. But you get the point I'm making. If you enjoy this movie, don't be afraid about that. Feels like people are afraid to say they enjoyed The Last Jedi. Feels like people are afraid to say they like it. And you know what? I'm not afraid anymore. I don't care what anybody says. Yeah, in my opinion, this film has problems. But I love it. I love it. I absolutely love this movie. I think it's brilliant. And I think it's the best Star Wars movie in the sequel trilogy. Because to me, it feels like Star Wars and it has all the great ingredients you want from a Star Wars movie, including a cracking John Williams musical score that makes this movie feel like that Star Wars that you fell in love with, that Star Wars that I fell in love with when I watched Empire Strikes Back for the first time, and that new Star Wars that I'm falling in love with as I watch this movie. That still makes me feel that way whenever I rewatch this film. Yes, as I've already said quite a few times in this review today, but I'm not afraid to say it again here, I love The Last Jedi. I love it, and that's why I'm going to say that Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, I'm going to say that it's a... You know what? I'm going to say it's a 9 out of 10. Because even with the problems that I have with this movie, I can get past all that. Because I find it so thoroughly entertaining. Like, yes, I have a problem with Admiral Holdo's storyline and how it's executed in this movie. But I still enjoy watching it. I have a problem with how Finn's storyline is treated as less important in this movie, but I still enjoy watching that storyline. Yes, I have a problem with how this film ends, particularly how the Resistance storyline is ended in this movie. But that doesn't mean I dislike the Resistance storyline any less when it comes to this film. No, I know I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again here. I find this film to be thoroughly entertaining. And at the end of the day, if a film is entertaining, then God, it's working. These Star Wars movies aren't meant to be something like The Godfather, where we dissect them, scene by scene in a film class. They're just meant to be entertainment. You can dissect the filmmaking for sure. There is so much to dissect by the filmmaking of any Star Wars movie. But the reality is, these Star Wars movies are, well, silly space films that work for us all on an emotional level because we watched them when we were kids for the first time. And the reality is, the movies that we watched when we were kids for the first time, like when I watched The Phantom Menace for the first time, I thought it was perfect. I thought it had no problems. But I watched that movie now and it does have loads of problems. And A New Hope has loads of problems that I've already spoken about. Empire Strikes Back has problems. It's a perfect movie in my eyes, but it has problems. So does Return of the Jedi. So does any Star Wars movie you can think about. Revenge of the Sith might be your favourite Star Wars movie, but heck, it has problems. And so does The Last Jedi. But it's a great Star Wars movie, in my opinion, that awakes that inner child within me and makes that inner child feel kind of amazed with how it subverts what you expected when it comes to this movie. And any Star Wars movie that awakes that inner child within you, I think, is a great sign, because at the end of the day, Star Wars movies are made for families, and in my opinion, this is a great family movie. Star Wars movies aren't made for incels to dwell on day on by day. No, that's not what Star Wars movies are made for. Star Wars movies are made to be thoroughly entertaining family movies that you can all enjoy, and in my opinion, this is a great family movie that follows on from The Force Awakens, awakes that inner child within you, and has all the best ingredients that you want from a Star Wars movie. And ultimately, those are just some of the reasons why I love it. And this review today has hopefully got across why I love this film so much. Then again, I do ramble on, so who knows what this review's been like today. But before I physically die from exhaustion from doing this review, and before I make any more, I don't even know what I'm saying anymore, before I make even less sense than I'm making right now, I'm going to round this review by saying one more time that yes, The Last Jedi isn't a flawless film, but in my opinion, it is an incredible movie, and an incredible Star Wars movie at that I think in years to come will be considered one of the best Star Wars movies. I might be wrong, but I do think it's up there as one of the better Star Wars movies. Not the best Star Wars movie, but you know what, yeah, I would say it's one of the best Star Wars movies. I'd even go as far as saying that. I love it. And so, all in all, as I've already said, and as I'm going to say once more in this podcast today, look, I almost stopped there. Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, is a 9 out of 10 from me. Anyway, guys, that's it for today's podcast. Man alive, we got there in the end. I'm not quite sure how. This is going to be an interesting one to edit. It's going to take me forever to edit. So, we got it in the end. Please let me know your thoughts on this film in the comment section below. And for God's sakes, please be respectful. If you don't like this movie, that's totally fine. But don't shout at me. And don't call me a non-Star Wars fan for not liking. Don't call me don't say that I'm not a proper Star Wars fan for liking this movie, because I mean, you're just embarrassing yourself if you're doing that, in my opinion. So yeah, please let me know your thoughts respectfully on this film in the comments section below. And as always, thanks for watching or listening to this podcast. And if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast. And look forward to many more videos and many more podcasts. Oh, just got almost burped there, so apologies. Coming very, very soon on this channel. As I've already said, thank you so much for watching or listening to this podcast. And yeah, look forward to my view of The Rise of Skywalker. Something I always got to mention. Look forward to my view of The Rise of Skywalker coming very, very soon on this channel. But until then, guys, over there. Thank you so much for watching or listening to this podcast. And I will see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye.